This week's episode is about Coral Vita. They're experts in coral farming and reef restoration, and they're so successful with their methods that they actually won last year's BBC Earthshot prize. Find out why coral farming and reef restoration are so important and crucial for the survival of our coral reefs. Let's roll the intro. I have visited Coral Vita on Grand Bahama when they were building their new lab. The old lab unfortunately was destroyed by a hurricane, but instead of giving up, they took the opportunity to rebuild their lab and improve upon the old one significantly. My visit was before the BBC filmed Coral Vita's operations for the BBC Earthshot prize, which they won. Coral Vita has since completed their new lab and increased their efficiency, their yields, and the quality of corals they produce. If you want to find out where they stand now and what has happened since we were there, I would like to invite you over to their website and social media platforms. The links are in the descriptions below this video.
My name is Sam Teicher. I'm the co-founder and chief reef officer of Coral Vita, and we are a mission-driven company that grows corals to restore dying reefs. So there's definitely not a ton of coral farmers in the world, and it's not what I grew up imagining I was going to become. I'm originally from Washington, D.C., not a place known for its coral reefs. But I became a scuba diver when I was 13 years old. My parents got my brother and I certifications as soon as we were old enough. And I've loved the ocean and I've loved nature ever since I was a child. Working my way through college, trying to figure out the things I wanted to sort of do with my life, I was interested in education reform. I was interested in peacemaking. So naturally, I studied climate change. Ultimately, I saw this as a thing that not only mattered to me personally, but impacted so many different things that I thought I wanted to work on in life. And so while I was going through that whole process, my focus was more on the policy side of things. Again, not a marine biologist, not doing anything in terms of that hard science, but really thinking about what are the ways that we can sort of construct a better path and framework forward where we can continue having a healthy environment for its own sake, as well as one that sustains all people everywhere. Rooted in my love for nature. I got into grad school at the Yale School of the Environment and I decided to take a year off. I was looking at desk jobs and back in DC for nonprofits and the like. And then a friend of mine, Vedant, who was a few years older than me in college, he's from the country of Mauritius out in the Indian Ocean. And it's a small tropical island nation. It's where the dodo bird is from. Yeah. And he invited me to set up the environmental branch of his NGO. And so I was thinking, desk job in DC, tropical island for a year. I'll see you guys later. I'm off to Mauritius. And the organization he started, Eli Africa, was providing educational support for at-risk kids. And again, growing up in DC, going to DC public schools, that was something that already spoke to me. While I was doing that also though, with the environmental work, we were planting mangroves, we were doing environmental education, and then we got a grant from the United Nations to do a coral reef restoration project in partnership with the Mauritius Oceanography Institute. And so that was my first experience doing coral farming back in 2012 and 2013, working with local communities, fishermen, students, religious leaders to basically help involve the people as well as the actual sort of corals that we were growing in this restoration and regeneration effort. And so I got to see on a very localized scale how coral farming works. and how it can, in the right conditions, bring reefs back to life. So our partner at MOI had an existing nursery that they were working in a lagoon where fishermen had abandoned it a decade before. Because just like if you don't have trees in the forest, there's not going to be deer, birds, all the other vegetation. If you lose corals, there's nowhere for marine life to basically call home. And so they had stopped fishing in this place for years and years and years, and just by the presence of these underwater coral nurseries, they were setting up their traps 100 yards away because there was so much more fish. So seeing, oh my God, we actually have an opportunity to bring reefs back to life. That experience, though, also colored how there's a ton of challenges with the existing model for restoration that I'm happy to go into more later. But that experience really gave me an eye-opening taste of the potential for restoration, but also the limitations with how it currently operates, and came back to grad school with that whole wonderful time in my mind, thinking about big environmental challenges that NGOs like the one I was at, and then the policy world, which I still was interested in, having had an opportunity to also intern at the White House doing climate change policy, they weren't solving big problems at the pace or scale we needed. And I met my co-founder, Gator. We were getting our master's degree together. He was more on the environmental science and academic track, and also felt that wasn't doing enough. And so we were thinking, what are some maybe new ways to solve big environmental problems? What if we come up with a mission-driven business to tackle a challenge? And that is what led us to launch Coral Vita.
Well, I'm Gator Halpern, and Sam and I started Coral Vita when we were in grad school at Yale. Before, I was on more of a traditional academic path, so I was studying environmental science and doing different research projects around the world. I did a fish farming project in the Amazon. I worked in the Peruvian Andes, also in South Africa. And I was doing this research science, studying something I thought was cool and interesting, and writing a paper about how it's changing the environment. And paper after paper, I kind of started feeling like I was writing the obituary of the world. And I love these ecosystems that I've been studying and just telling everybody about how they're in a constant state of decline. And so I decided to kind of shift paths out of academia, and thought I could really try to make more of a difference by starting a mission-driven company, trying to directly address one of these issues that I care deeply about. And partnered up with Sam, and we coalesced around a kind of shared passion for the ocean. I grew up in San Diego, spent as much time as I could on the beach and in the waves, and even in my relatively short lifetime, I've seen how drastically oceans have been shifting. And so Sam and I came up with the idea to try to innovate in the space of reef restoration and make a company that can hopefully make a significant difference when we think about trying to keep reefs around for generations to come.
Why did you decide to set up Coral Vita as a business?
It's a good question. Definitely not what comes to mind when you think about coral reef restoration, often a lot of environmental work. So the coral restoration science and community has existed for several decades at this point, and there are incredible organizations, practitioners, community leaders, scientists doing such important work around the world. And they've shown, like that experience I had in Mauritius, that reefs can be brought back to life. Unfortunately, there are a number of key challenges with the existing model for restoration. So like what I did in Mauritius, most projects around the world use underwater coral gardens, which is a pretty amazing day at the office. But if you think about having to set up and maintain a garden at or every reef that needs to be restored around the world, that's just not feasible. There are also many different types of corals, some of which grow super fast. So you can have a cutting the size of your finger grow to your hand and wrist in 6, 9, 12 months for these fast-growing branching species of corals. But the big bouldering corals and encrusting and plating species, which are really important for habitat and for species diversity and a whole bunch of other important functions, they could take decades to reach the same size. So most restoration projects only grow the fast-growing species. There are a number of things that are killing corals. One of the big ones happening now and moving forward is climate change, rising temperatures and acidification. And when you're growing corals out in the ocean, you're effectively subject to the whims of the environment, and there's not a lot you can do to really strengthen corals to better survive climate changing conditions. And then the existing model is largely grant and donation funded. So that project that I did, it was amazing to get a grant from the United Nations. I would not say the process of getting that grant is amazing. And it let us grow 5,000 pieces of corals once. And for those who aren't sort of familiar of imagining a coral fragment, think of that almost like a tree sapling. A country like Mauritius, one small island nation, probably needs closer to 5 million corals being grown and outplanted every year. And when our funding expired, that was the end of the project. And so many of these projects that are being done, a grant here, a donation there, the ocean-based model, limitations on the ecological side, it doesn't cut it for the scale of this problem, because where we're at right now is we've lost half of the world's coral reefs since the 1970s. And we're currently on track to lose over 90% by 2050, within the next 30 years. So this is not some distant promise for the future. This is happening right now. And the best thing to do for coral reefs, obviously, is to stop killing them. All right, restoration is not a silver bullet. I'll be the first one to say that. We need our leaders in industry and in the media and in government to solve for climate change and overfishing and pollution and habitat destruction. But A, that's not happening fast enough. And B, even with climate change, if, I hope, although we're not on track for that, we hit the Paris goals tomorrow, the ocean is going to continue warming and corals will continue dying. So we need to dramatically rethink and upscale things like coral reef restoration. And so taking a step back from my love and Gator's love and our whole team's just appreciation for coral reefs and the biodiversity, they are incredibly valuable. So coral reefs take up less than 1% of the ocean floor, while sustaining 1/4 of marine life. And there's up to 1 billion people in over 100 countries and territories that depend on them for some fashion, for feeding their families and paying the bills, for job security, for protection from storms, on and on and on. There are medicinal compounds that are found already in life-saving drugs we use. They power tourism economies. A healthy coral reef reduces wave energy by 97%. It's the best seawall you can ask for. And then it also underpins fisheries, not just for artisanal fishers, but commercial fishers as well. So reefs are really valuable. Conservatively, they generate $30 billion a year. Other very respected estimates put that in the hundreds of billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars. So as reefs die, that's obviously an ecological tragedy, but it's also a socioeconomic catastrophe. So our thought to your original question, why do we start this as a business, is grants and donations aren't going to cut it. There's also some limitations on the ecological side. What if we can, looking at that value, create a mission-driven commercial model where we can unlock funding to do critically needed ecosystem scale restoration while incorporating breakthrough methods developed by scientific advisors and partners, where we can grow corals up to 50 times faster, months instead of decades, strengthen the resilience to climate change threats, and then grow corals on land at farms like the one you see here behind me, where we can dramatically upscale restoration, potentially supply an entire island or nation's reefs from a single farm site. And that is how we came to launch Coral Vita and why we chose to do it as a business.
So here at Coral Vita, we have an innovative version of reef restoration where we're commercializing some new methods and technologies being made by partner research institutions around the world and creating a scalable model that we can replicate in other places. And what that looks like is a land-based coral farm with a bunch of tanks we call raceways in an aquaculture setup that we can pump water through and grow small fragments of corals into their own coral colonies. And that process is we actually go out to the reef, collect coral fragments, often fragments that have already broken off the reef in previous storms or waves, and we bring them back here to the farm. After a quarantine period, we then fragment those corals up. Because corals are these fascinating creatures that actually grow in colonies. So if you're looking at one coral, you're actually looking at hundreds, if not thousands, of individual animals that grow into this colony. And that allows us to actually break up a single colony into many smaller colonies. And each of those colonies can actually grow into their own fully mature colony. So we collect coral off the reef, fragment them into the tiny pieces, and then grow them here at the farm from between 6 to 12 months, depending on the species. And at that point, we can do some really interesting things, either putting them right back out on the reef and letting them continue growing out in the ocean, or even fusing them back together here at the farm from the other fragments that came from the original parent colony. So in that way, we can grow coral, fuse them together, break them apart, fuse them together, and grow sizable colonies up to 50 times faster than they would grow in nature. That's like growing a dinner plate sized coral in about a year, whereas in nature that would take many decades. And then we scuba dive down and actually plant those mature corals back into the reef. And as soon as you do, it's a pretty magical experience. You can see the reef come back to life, the fish starting to come back and populate the area, and it's really a delight when you get to see that reef come back to life.
Here at Coral Vita, I am the director of aquaculture operation, and at the same time I am the coral husbandry specialist. So my main role, in 2 words, is try, without try, I'm doing it, to supply our system with perfect and optimal water quality in order to allow the coral to have an optimal growth. And but what I'm actually doing right now, I'm upgrading the entire system, because unfortunately after Dorian, the well water that they used to use to grow coral is not good anymore because it has been contaminated. And so I had the idea to just pump the water from the main canal, because our canal here in our back is unfortunately a closed branch, which is mean have a great circulation and a lot of sediment and a lot of nutrients. So not the best chemistry condition for corals. So I checked the water from the main canal, which is directly linked to the main open ocean, and the water chemistry is perfect there. Is just hot. So what we have to do with our new filtration system is basically pump the water in from the main canal, filter it, and cool it down in order to have an optimal temperature for the coral. Our system is, I call it semi-open, because basically we pump and constantly fresh water, fresh salt water from the canal. We pump it inside in our system, and the old bad water overflow outside. And we have also our closed loop system, which is linked to our hydronic system with 2 heat pump. And with these 2 heat pump, we are able to control precisely the temperature of the water. In the same time, since the electricity is really expensive here on the island, and we try to minimize the expenses, we use the water from the well, which all over the year have a constant temperature of 25 degrees. We use it to cool it down, the hot water coming from the canal, the warm water coming from the canal, using a heat exchanger which is in titanium. A big thanks about all of this to my friends back home in Italy, Ocean Life, Simone and Luca, which they did an amazing job, and they put a lot of effort in order to provide us with a really top level grade, a grade A level of filtration system that we are installing right now today.
One key message is that reefs are really at the forefront of climate change. They're the first major ecosystem around the world that we're seeing collapse due to climate change. We've already lost half of our world's reefs. We're set to lose over 90% by 2050. We need to act urgently if we're going to be able to save these reefs and really deal with climate change. First and foremost, the best thing we can do to reefs is to stop killing them. But even while we address climate change, we need to urge our leaders and politicians to actively address these issues and sustain these ecosystems through proper marine management, marine protected areas, as well as active restoration and actually planting corals, bringing these reefs back to life in order to sustain the incredibly valuable services that these ecosystems provide.
So even if you don't live near reefs or have ever been to one, you do have an opportunity to help. Now, I said it before, I'll say it again, as much as I love my job and it's completely necessary, the best thing to do for coral reefs is not to restore them, it's to stop killing them. So if you're lucky to live in a democracy, vote. Vote for leaders who will act on climate change, on overfishing, on habitat destruction. And also, if you're not or you are, vote with your wallet, because we live in a place where money makes the world go round. And we are seeing more and more corporations pay attention to a lot of these major social causes and changing their decisions based on how people are spending their money. There's definitely an ability for each one of us to take individual steps to help on things like climate change, changing what we're eating, flying less, driving the right cars. But ultimately the responsibility should not be put on us as much as a select group of corporations and countries that are responsible for the vast majority of inaction or bad action. So having that as your individual choice is really, I think, the most powerful thing we can do. I also hope you'll just take the time to visit a coral reef if you can. If not, go to an aquarium or go online, learn more, immerse yourself. There's really nothing quite like snorkeling and scuba diving too. But to be in the water, to see it around you, to really have that experience is really amazing. And if you can't get in the ocean, then some form of nature too, because it really gives us that opportunity to both enjoy it, but then also appreciate what it gives us. Because ultimately what we're talking about, Earth will be fine. The planet's gonna keep spinning, evolution will do its course. But the ecosystems and the climate that has been stable enough for us to make the jump from bands of hunter-gatherers to modern civilization is getting thrown out of whack. So what's under threat the most, in addition to the tragic biodiversity loss, is humanity's prosperity and well-being. So also I hope people will get the opportunity to visit our farms. If they really want to support us, you can go online and adopt a coral on our website. Follow us on social media at Coral Vita Reefs. And yeah, hopefully we'll get the chance to plant corals with you one day soon.
Join us on our next episode where we go out with Coral Vita on 2 dives, where the team shows us how to plant corals on the reef and attach fragments onto coral trees. It was exciting to see how Coral Vita mounted the corals, which is not without challenges in a weightless environment, as you can probably imagine. We had a lot of fun joining the team, and we hope that you tune in again to learn how this all works. A special thanks also to our friend Dominic Gayson, who made all of this possible. Our platform relies on the support of good people like you. If you feel that we are doing the right thing and you like what we do, then please subscribe to our YouTube channel, click the like button and hit the bell icon so you won't miss any of our episodes. There's also the share option just below this video, where you can help us to spread our episodes to your friends and colleagues, which would help us a great deal. Please also leave your comment below and let us know what you think. We value your opinion and we will listen to what you have to say. If you want to make a really big difference and keep the Oceans project going, we would welcome your ongoing support as one of our patrons. The link to our Patreon is in the description below. As a Patreon member, you will be able to suggest new projects, and all members can vote on the topics and projects they would like to see us doing in the future. You can also follow us live through our Garmin InReach satellite system. Become a member of the Oceans Project and help us to make the world a better place. Together we can make a real difference. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you back here on our channel soon.